Say hello to my brother-in-law. His name is George. Just say, hello, George.
Hello, George.
Guess who that was? What do you mean you don't know? Don't you go to the movies? What are you, a moron?
Hello and welcome to Rumpled Trenchcoat, a Columbo podcast for all your Columbo needs. I'm Rich Nocella and I'm here with my sister,
Adrienne Nocella.
And this episode we're going to talk about today is Requiem for a Falling Star, 1972, although aired in 73. Starring, of course, Peter Falk as Columbo, Ann Baxter as the murderous falling star Nora Chandler, Pippa Scott as the hapless assistant Jean Davis, and Mel Ferrer as a gossip columnist who in his spare time rides around in a van solving crimes with teenagers.
He wore a lot of Fred scarves in this episode. Is that the reference?
That's definitely the reference. I guess technically it wasn't an ascot, which is what Fred really wears, but he had on a pretty ridiculous scarf at one point, as well as lots of blazers with turtlenecks. So I'm sure we'll probably be talking about fashion in this one quite a bit.
Oh, full-on 70s fashion. I love how they dressed Ann Baxter in this episode.
So this episode starts with us seeing Nora holding a gun, walking through a room into a shower, and opening fire several times on somebody in the shower who then slumps down to the ground. And we as an audience are like, oh, wow, the murder's happening already, just like in Suitable for Framing, which also had an almost immediate murder. But once that happens, she turns to the camera and says, oh, shoot, I missed, or something like that. And then we pull back and see that this is really just a TV show being shot and filmed, and so that this is all fake, which in a sense, it subverted our expectations for Columbo, because we usually expect to see that murder relatively right away. Usually we get to learn about motive and everything first, and then we see the murder. But it's not out of the question to just see a murder happen early on.
Right, to start the episode with an immediate murder. It's not, it's certainly happened before.
Yes, exactly. So this is really, kind of almost a tip to the audience that this episode may be a little more different, that we've already faked you out, Columbo watchers. After that scene, and everybody's kind of fawning over her, and there's like, congratulating themselves on the scene well shot. Mm-hmm. She and her, I guess, on-site assistant.
He's the props manager, but he likes her. Like, they have a friendly relationship, but he's really just like the props manager.
He is rocking a above the belly button pair of pants, like that must be his style, because he's seen a couple of times throughout the episode on different days wearing different versions of that type of pants. So
listen, you find something you like, you buy it in different colors, and that's like your daily uniform. I get it. I just think it's questionable that that's what he chooses that he likes. It's not doing anything for his figure is what I'm trying to say.
It's not. He probably would have done a lot better to untuck that shirt, I think. And
this guy is great, because honestly, I'd love to work with somebody like that. He has her back throughout this entire episode, and he's like, oh, I know I'm just supposed to hand you like a thermos here and there, but I'm going to draw your attention to something that's going on outside. She didn't ask him to do that. He just did it.
No, he's the one who just let her out and said, hey, just to let you know, this guy's parked outside, which we find out is basically outside her house. She has a house on the movie lot. And I believe they said a half acre.
Yeah, it's huge. That's huge.
Again, as we find out things as we go along, we know that she was married to the owner of the whole film company.
Right.
And so she got that house because that's what they had lived when they were married. So we'll get to more revelations later, because right now she's entering her house kind of surreptitiously and overhears her personal assistant, Jean Davis, having a conversation with noted gossip columnist Jerry Parks. And it's pretty clear that they're a couple. They're intimate. Yes. Jean, the assistant, is talking about how she's arranged for a whole birthday evening celebration of Jerry, and that it's obviously going to be this big to-do. She's a personal assistant, so she's used to arranging things. So she's got this
I was just thinking when I was watching that scene, I'm like, oh, I'd love to date a personal assistant because she planned the most beautiful like evening for him, accounting for she knew his evening work schedule. I'm like,
That's
this
right.
is great. That's who I need to date, a personal assistant.
That's exactly it. Because honestly, that's because she knew he had a book signing that was supposed to end at a certain time and blah, blah, blah. So the whole thing got it all locked down. And of course, we, the audience, see that Nora Chandler is not happy about this development.
Right. She's eavesdropping on their little romantic couple banter. And she's clearly unhappy that they're canoodling.
So Jean is embarrassed by the scene. She obviously hasn't told. This is certainly, supposed to be a secret from Nora.
Right. A secret romance. Yeah.
Right. And so Jean makes some excuses and leaves. And that's when Nora and Jerry have a conversation. We find out that Jerry wants to either write a book about Nora's life, because he's written several books.
Mm-hmm.
He's written a lot of true Hollywood stories type books,
Right.
And Nora clearly does not want him to write one about her.
No.
He effectively is blackmailing her, or is going to. He says, hey, look, I did some research into your life because I thought I was going to write this book. And we find out that Nora, and it was unclear how she did it, but that she was able to defraud the old movie company out of $2 million.
Right. And are you waiting for me to tell you what that's valued at today?
I actually am waiting for you to tell me what that's valued at today.
It's a tremendous amount of money. It's over $14 million. That's a huge amount of money. Even for a movie studio, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And
that's what low budget, like independent films cost to make. So that's an entire film done. That's what she's accused of, or that's what he's accusing her of stealing, I guess.
And it's pretty clear that she was guilty of it. I mean, she's not denying it. She's just saying, look, I just don't want this to come out. And she effectively agrees to pay him some amount of money that they'll determine later. So she's really flat out confessing that she did defraud the company she's working for a significant amount of money. Right. I think that's at least 3/4 of the maestro's house in Etude in Black.
I think you're right.
So not much later on, I guess Jean comes back after Jerry leaves.
Yes.
And the two of them, Nora and Jean, kind of have it out a little bit, where Nora is making it clear that this guy, Jerry, is just after Jean to get a bunch of secrets on Nora, that he doesn't really care for her.
Right.
Jean is obviously upset and saying, no, we're getting married. He loves me. And it's pretty clear that she's not going to talk her out of this.
Right. Jean loves Jerry. Jean thinks Jerry loves her. She thinks Nora's wrong. Right. That Jerry's only interested in her for secrets about Nora.
That's what Nora's contending. Nora's saying, hey, this guy's just using you.
Right.
So Nora backs off a little bit when she sees how much Jean really still loves this guy. And she's like, look, I'm sorry. I should be the one apologizing to you. By the way, here's a 5 hours list of errands that I want you to do tonight.
Right.
And we know that that's Jean's day off.
Right.
And that she was going to have this big party. And we know that Nora knows that. So we know that Nora's purposely giving her a lot of busy work on the day where she should have just been able to go home.
Yes. Nora seems to have a visible reaction when Jean affirms that they're going to get married.
Yes. And a visible reaction when Jean just says, you're wrong. Yeah. So it also makes you realize, this is a woman who doesn't like being told that she's wrong, or she doesn't like being confronted.
Certainly not by Jean.
Right. Certainly not by somebody who she is kind of treating like a servant. And I know she's a personal assistant, but, even personal assistants should be allowed to disagree with their boss from time to time.
It's like they're crossing a personal line. There's like a boundary there where it's not just really an employee. They definitely have a personal relationship.
Well, we do find out later that she was her assistant for 18 years.
A long time, yeah.
So I'm sure that Nora is certainly not happy about losing her, but I think she's also much less happy about the secrets that she could be telling this guy, Jerry Parks.
Right. She's upset about losing her to Jerry Parks, but also if she's going to marry anybody, this is the worst person to marry because he's just saying to her, he just blackmailed her when Jean left for a hot second and he had managed to blackmail Nora. And then she comes back in and then Jean's like, I'm going to marry that blackmailer. But Jean has no idea that he's blackmailing Nora, and Nora certainly doesn't outright tell Jean that he's blackmailing her.
No, she does not.
Yeah.
She does not, which is interesting because it does make you wonder if things might have been slightly different if she did.
Correct.
But I think it's pretty clear that the plan has already been effected.
Yes.
Nothing really consequential happens, but we now see Jerry at the book signing some books for people online. This is all done silently, which is kind of my favorite type of thing in a TV show. Jean drives to the book signing, and we see his car that we'd already seen before, and they made a big point of showing us, the audience, this is Jerry Parks's car.
Right.
So Jean drives next to it, hops out. You see her talking hurriedly to him, and so we're assuming that she's telling him, hey, can you believe that witch gave me a whole list of things to do today? We'll have to arrange something different. But while she's in the bookstore, we do see Nora, who has clearly followed them to the place, get out of her car. We cut to the inside to see the two of them talking. We don't hear any of it, but we assume. And then we see Nora get back into her car, and that's it for that scene. And it's like, well, what was that really about? You know?
Yeah, they cut back to her in her car, and then she takes off, though. She leaves before Jean leaves before Jerry.
Yeah. So we're kind of left wondering, what was that all about? We'll find out. Because then the very next scene is her wearing, I think, a hat and trench coat.
She's not wearing a hat and trench coat.
She's not wearing a hat.
Which is irritating to me.
Yes. Because she should have been, right? Yeah. Okay.
She is in disguise, but she kind of is in disguise.
She just has a shawl, right?
She's got like a babushka headscarf. She's got giant sunglasses, a headscarf, which to me is always so much more conspicuous than if you just went around with your face. Because it's like she's wearing these giant sunglasses and a headscarf at night, in the middle of the night. Yes. And she is wearing a trench coat. You are right. I think she's wearing a trench coat. But yeah.
I think some kind of overcoat, but in my brain, for reasons we'll find out later, I had her always wearing the hat, which is, you're right, it's not correct once you said that. I realize that. But what she is doing is pouring a whole bunch of gasoline on the driveway, and then
I guess that's not really very inconspicuous either. Just pouring a gallon of gasoline in somebody's driveway.
A gallon of gasoline in somebody's driveway back when, you needed to have an even numbered license plate to get gas, because you can only get gas every other day. So, this is during this shortage where we were lucky. I remember as kids that one of our cars had an even numbered plate and one had an odd numbered plate. So theoretically, mom and dad could get gas every day.
You and Judy remember that. I don't know if I was born. I don't know when this happened. You wouldn't have been born. Oh, okay.
No, because this was like 72, 3, 4-ish. Yeah, no, you were not even born yet. But that was a big deal. So it is kind of funny to see somebody just pour an entire gallon of gas on the driveway. That would have been probably conspicuous of her buying it in the first place. So, of course, we now see Jerry's car pull into the driveway seconds later. So, I don't know how fast. I don't know the timing of it. The timing of it was pretty crazy.
She cuts it close, and then also she beeps as also we hear the car beep as it's pulling up the driveway.
Yes. And then Nora lights a Wile E. Coyote fuse.
It's really funny. Ann Baxter looks like, you watch this and you kind of take for granted that there's safety on studios and stuff and the set, but like she really lit a line of gasoline on fire, and that fire was real close to Ann Baxter's face.
It made me a little bit worried. Yes, I mean you want to hope that they had safety on board, especially for, not that it would matter if it wasn't anyone famous, but I mean Ann Baxter, is a famous celebrity.
A pretty big star.
Yeah. So, and of course, that line engulfs the car completely in flames, causes an explosion, and that's that. So Nora Chandler then scoots to a restaurant where she's with Dr. Simmons, played by Kevin McCarthy, of course, from Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Okay, thank you. I was like, where is this guy from? I know
Yeah.
his face. Okay, that's who he is. Thank you.
Yeah, he was also the villain in Weird Al's UHF, but probably more familiar with him in Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
I've seen both a couple of times.
Yeah.
Also
with the young hotshot studio head, who we also don't know is the studio head. They kept that from us for some reason. I don't know if they just. I think they wanted to have a silly joke about Columbo not realizing the guy he was talking to was the boss because he was so young, but it really was pointless. That's when the waiter interrupts. We find out the police are there to tell her some bad news about a terrible accident happening at Jerry Parks's house. And so she said, well, we're not, I don't know why you went to tell me. We're not that great a friends. And then all of a sudden, Jerry Parks walks into the restaurant saying, did you tell her yet? Yeah. And that's when we find out that it was the assistant, Gene Davis, who died in the explosion. And then a bizarrely fake fainting spell happens. I don't. She might as well
faints. Said like. Yeah. She might as well just been like, I need the. What is it? I have the vapors.
I have the vapors. Yes.
Yeah. She had a very it was almost like a slow motion, like you better catch me faint.
Yes.
Whoever's standing behind me better catch me because I'm about to fake faint.
Yeah, it was more of a trust fall than a faint.
Yeah, it was like corporate team building trust fall.
Yeah, I think the sister in Old Fashioned Murder with Joyce Van Patten was probably more realistically fainting.
I love her faints.
So now we finally just about. I originally thought it was 13 minutes into the episode, but my copy of it actually had coming attractions of this episode. So it's probably a little closer to 11 minutes into the episode. Columbo shows up.
Police Department, Lieutenant Columbo. Would you mind if I came in?
He's pulling his car into the studio lot. Of course, it's at the guard gate. And you have this cute moment where the guard thinks that he's there for the demolition derby scene.
It's so offensive because it's like not even just like, oh, this is a stunt car. It's like, oh, this is going to get demolished in a demolition derby scene. So it's not even just like a stunt car or a background car. It's like, but again, you know what? It's one thing for Columbo to be driving such a terrible car, right? But it's just like covered in dust. It's filthy.
Yes.
Like why he can't get it? I understand that it's an older car. Like you can't get that washed. You can't wash it.
Well, I guess not.
I guess he's busy.
I guess so, because they even make a point of it later when he has Nora in there and he even apologizes for all the dust. So I think they went out of their way for the dust on this one.
It's so dusty.
It is. And he's saying, oh, no, I've got can't you see my police sticker? What sticker? And the sticker has clearly been scraped off the window. And he's like, what happened to my sticker? It's just, they really went full boobery tomfoolery on that little intro.
Yeah.
But I think it's very funny that he repeats verbatim the line from Etude in Black when the guy says, why don't you get another car? And he says, well, I have another car. It's my wife's, but that's nothing fancy, just for transportation. So it's almost word for word the same line. So in my mind, I'm thinking that Columbo was probably told all day long you should get another car from everybody he sees. And that's just his stock answer to everybody, because that's now 2 for 2. And I do think it's funny that, like, we're supposed to, they're trying to, like, hey, it's a little fun fantasy world now at the backlight of a movie set, and their idea of something crazy was, a Native American riding a bicycle with a spear and a carousel being driven through.
Wait, what?
As Columbo drives to the house at the back of this lot, we're seeing just a Native American in full headdress holding a spear but riding a bicycle to get to his next shot, and a car driving by with an entire carousel on it. And that's supposed
I missed all of that. Sorry, go ahead. I missed all of that. Yes. I'm usually pretty observant. I missed literally all. That's why I'm like, what are you talking about? I missed all of that. So that's just supposed to be like, this is a busy movie Hollywood studio.
Yes.
And these are our extras or whatever.
This is what's going on because this is a world of fantasy and make believe, and now we're this is where all the magic happens, and then that's their idea of fantasy and make believe.
Oh, that's so funny.
It's that. So I don't know. That's what's funnier to me is that it didn't even register in your brain because it was only like a few seconds. So to be fair,
I usually pick up on stuff like that. I completely missed all of that. I definitely missed both of those things. Both those references.
Those are the only two things.
Okay.
Columbo is getting out of his horribly dusty car in front of Nora Chandler's house. And it is kind of cute. He like super grooms himself. He's like shining his shoes. He's straightening his tie. He's fixing his jacket. He's checking his cuticles, Yes. And then the young hotshot guy comes out and starts yelling at him. And he says, no, I'm here from the police department. I called ahead. And then you hear Kevin McCarthy saying, I'll take care of it. And so immediately before he said a word, you know what I'm going to say, is that he's scolded by somebody else who would normally have no authority over him to take it easy on the poor female witness who had to be hospitalized.
Not only does he have no authority over a police lieutenant, he's not her husband.
No.
He's I guess technically her boss, but again, it's like an etude in black. It's like, I don't know, these they're giving a lot of license to this boss relationship where it's like, hold on, everybody, I'm going to command this scene.
I think, to be fair, in this particular case, it's pretty heavily implied very early on, like when they're in the restaurant, that their relationship's more personal. But you're right, he's not a husband. He's at most a boyfriend who also owns the entire studio, and I think several other studios, because he owns Fallon's, who's the guy who runs this studio, and the implication is that he owns several. So he would be, I guess, like a Murtaugh or whoever would own more than one major studio. But he's already warning Columbo.
Well, he's her he's her boyfriend, and he comes out, and Columbo wasn't antagonistic at all. He was really just showing up to interview.
He didn't say a word.
No, he just is really showing up to find out what happened to poor Jean, and he gets yelled at.
He's immediately given the old, I'll have your union card,
You better watch it.
Or you'll have to answer to me. Wait.
Which means what?
Yeah, what exactly? I'm a homicide lieutenant. Do I have to answer to, like Eisner from the Disney company? What?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's kind of ridiculous. So he enters, and it's very cute. In so many of these episodes, he's pretending that his wife is a fan to throw somebody off the scent. But here, I think, and I guess we could discuss it, but I think he genuinely has always loved her as an actress.
Oh, yeah, no, he's starstruck. He walks in and he's starstruck, and he does. And he's like, can you call my wife immediately? Yes. But I do think he really thinks that I do think he's a big fan of hers. Yeah,
I think so. I think this is one of those few times where he doesn't say, oh, my wife never mixes a picture. It just, he literally, he is the fan this time. I mean, she's a fan too, but, his wife is a fan too, rather, but he's a fan. So there's just that delightful moment where he calls, and of course his wife is out, because even, I feel this episode more than any other proves that he actually does have a wife. So that at least we can know that much. What he says about her in the other episodes is something different. But I feel
doubted that he had a wife.
Every once in a while, it was like, well, is he just saying that to throw people off? She's such a mystery. I always thought that he did, but I know that there are definitely some people who were wondering about that.
Well, his wife in this episode's always out buying fish.
Yeah, she's apparently buying fish every single day.
Actually, that's a good way to buy fish, though. You should buy that. That should be a fresh purchase. So, good for Mrs. Columbo.
That's right. Everyone loves a mystery. And so there's just that cute scene where she says, hello, George. Just that whole little telephone exchange. And then Columbo's just clearly having a really fun time. He's just having
Hello, George. This is Nora Chandler. How are you?
Ask him how tall he is.
George, how tall are you?
Sorry, George, I gotta run.
A good time there. And meanwhile, she is not acting particularly sad for somebody who lost her companion of 18 years.
Yeah.
And who was so upset at the news that she had to go to the hospital for the night. So that, I'm wondering if that's kind of unconsciously hitting Columbo's radar. He doesn't say it. In a lot of other episodes, he'd say, oh, if it was me and I found out, blah, blah, blah. he doesn't mention it at all. It's just
No.
kind of a given that that we're just kind of moving past that.
Right. It is a disconnect. You're right.
I think this is where we find out that she's been the assistant for 18 years. And so as Columbo and Nora are talking, he sees some photos on the wall of her and her late husband. Columbo notices that her husband is wearing a Shriner's ring, and he also notices that the husband is kind of short.
Yes.
It's funny because later he says you're the same height, but the one photo, she's clearly like 4 inches shorter than him.
That's right.
But still, in all, she's kind of short. Lieutenant Columbo's kind of short. This guy would have only been a couple of inches taller than either of them. So,
right.
Fair enough. And he asked, when was that photo taken with the Shriner's ring? And she said, oh, the day before he died.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to come back to that later. Just remind me in case I forget.
Okay.
Because I could easily forget. And he also goes out onto the garden and sees that she has this fountain that we found out she got from the props department because it was a prop in a movie she was in when she was very young, like kind of early on in her fame. And he asks to clip a flower off it as a momentum to give to Mrs. Columbo. And we find out that apparently Mrs. Columbo steals ashtrays from restaurants.
Yeah. He does blame a lot of stuff on her.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, I know he has a wife. Yeah. Does she really steal ashtrays from restaurants? I don't know
not.
if she does. I'm thinking probably. Columbo remembers why he was there, and that was to take Nora to the garage where they have kept the exploded car.
Yes.
Which is interesting because he didn't have to actually physically do that.
I don't know why he takes her there at all.
Yeah.
At all.
There's no reason except if he wants to judge her reaction, which is why I'm wondering if he's at least suspecting or at least trying to rule her in or out as a possible suspect. Because there's no reason for her to physically be taken to see the car that exploded with her assistant in it and then for him to immediately shield her view from it. So we see this exploded husk of a car with all 4 of its tires intact. So I'll just toss that little continuity error in there.
Okay.
And that's when we find out that Jerry Parks and Jean Davis couldn't have she been named Susan? Did it have to be Jerry and Jean?
Oh, this is all it is. Yeah.
They swapped cars because Jean Davis's car had a flat tire.
Right.
And if it wasn't for that, well, then she wouldn't have been driving Parks's car, and therefore, as far as we know, would not have been murdered.
Right. So this makes it seem like Parks was the intended target.
Yes.
Because it was his car and it was his house, and this is where the explosion occurred.
Exactly. So it would certainly make sense if he was the victim, and Columbo kind of subtly lets out, yes, this was murder. Like the idea of it being an accident is already dismissed.
Right.
You know, he's already jumping right to murder. And of course, there is that great moment where he says, the only reason your poor secretary is dead is because someone made a terrible mistake last night. And then he turns his head sharply to her to stare right at her. And she's just kind of staring ahead. Like all of a sudden she went emotionless. She was all emotionally and acting and everything, and then all of a sudden she was just kind of stone-faced, and he was literally glaring at her. He may be starstruck, but he's still Columbo.
Right.
So I guess the next scene then is at Jerry Parks's office, right? I mean, I guess he's showing him the accident area. Jerry isn't really believing that somebody tried to kill him, or I don't know why he thinks his car just accidentally exploded. I mean, what is he thinking?
Yeah, why would he think that someone wouldn't try to kill him when there was a scorch mark and a line? Like you said, it's like a Wile E. Coyote line to like, I stood here and I poured gasoline there.
Yeah. I mean, there might as well have been that little blueprint hanging up on the wall with like Wile E. holding a gas can and dotted lines and then a match. I mean, it was so clearly somebody stood there, lit the flame, boom, and engulfed the car in flames. And meanwhile, this guy's blackmailing half of Hollywood. So, I mean, you know, even if he didn't want to admit that, you'd think he'd still be like, somebody could be trying to kill me.
He's kind of like, I don't know if I have the right person, but I feel like he's kind of like a Dominic Dunn character. You know Dominic Dunn?
I don't, actually.
Oh, well, kind of like this guy. he no, he would write. He was like a Hollywood insider, and he would write Hollywood stuff. And then this is a whole side tangent.
Okay.
He was a Hollywood insider. He would write Hollywood articles for Vanity Fair a lot. And then in the middle of his career, he pivoted towards covering scandalous Hollywood true crime. And he's actually the father of the girl who was murdered from Poltergeist. So that's what started it. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
This is a whole other
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So I could certainly see that. So again, it was kind of strange that he was resisting it so hard. I mean, you have 2 empty gas cans, this obvious scorch line. His car blew up.
His car blew up, and he is blackmailing. I mean, his office is filled with files on every A-lister in Hollywood.
Yes.
So it's like, just pick a drawer that could have been somebody who would want him dead.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's
it's just filled with file cabinets, filled with these files. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, one of the drawers was devoted specifically just to Chandler. So she had a whole drawer.
A lot of dirt.
He had a lot of photographs that were autographed. He had Ann Baxter's headshot on his desk.
He did.
But at least it made sense in this context because she was an actress.
Right. But that does make sense. This is the only time a headshot is appropriate, and it's the least it's not, they're hung up on the wall. So it's still not as awkward as having it on a piano or on your desk or anywhere else. But at least finally an episode where it makes sense to have headshots.
Yes. They were on the wall, but he also had a second one of her on his desk, which was
a photo of Nora Chandler on his desk?
Yes, but as a much younger,
Parks?
Yeah.
Did I watch this episode? How did I miss that?
Because again, it was subtle, and all the other ones, they do a big zoom focus on it and say, "Oh, poor brother Brent," or they pick it up and then place it face down on the desk because they're sick of the guy, and short fuse. In this one, it just happened to be on the desk while Columbo was talking to him, and there wasn't a lot of that 2-shot. It was mostly from the outer of the desk.
Maybe he had a headshot of her on a desk when she was younger because he was writing a book on her at the time. So it was sort of, right? Okay.
I think that's reasonable.
Otherwise, why would you just have, that's if you just showed up to my house and had a picture of, Mel Ferrar on my desk.
Yes.
You'd be like, why are you doing
that? Why him? I also don't know if it implies that they had more of a relationship, but that's all just stuff that's never actually addressed. It's just, I don't know if they just figured it made sense for him to have that picture there. Columbo does find out a little bit of gossip. Chandler's husband had a casting couch. They had an argument one night. He went out on a fishing trip, never to be seen again. The boat was found smashed, but we don't even find that out in this segment. We find that out later, and just that he was declared dead 12 years ago.
Right.
That's it. The only other thing is that Columbo got into the office in the first place by saying, "Hey, could I use your phone?"
Yes.
Basically just an excuse to get inside and just find out some more dirt on what he maybe did or didn't have on Chandler. Was there anything I'm missing from that scene?
Yeah, so in the middle of that, Nora calls Jerry, and then Jerry pretends it's a wrong number because Columbo's there.
Right.
So Jerry knows that Nora's calling him because he did just blackmail her a day before. Really, just a day before.
Murdered, yeah.
Yeah, and then Nora's calling him, and he's pretending that it's a wrong number, and Nora looks puzzled. And he's pretending it's a wrong number because he does not want to talk to her in front of Columbo.
In front of Columbo. And I guess so then that makes it important that Columbo, it's stuck in his mind that Jerry keeps calling the killer a he.
Yes.
And that Columbo said, "Oh, that person who just called you was a woman, right?" Because if a guy calls and it's got the wrong number, you just say, sorry, wrong number, and hang up. But what a woman does, you're a lot more polite. So he's already getting across the idea that, maybe we're looking at a female killer.
Right.
That we're just assuming that it's male, but we could be looking at a female.
The other important thing from that scene, I think, is that Jerry does tell Columbo a little bit of gossip, but Columbo's like, well, that's all been in the press. We knew that.
Right.
And Jerry's sort of like, yeah, that's my point. Why would I bother blackmailing? Because Columbo's sort of implying that he's blackmailing Nora Chandler.
Yes.
And then Jerry is responding, why would I bother blackmailing this has-been of an actress?
Right.
Everything that's known about her is known
It's
about her. It's already
public
been
knowledge.
published. So she hasn't had a hit in years. No one really cares about her. I wouldn't be writing about her. So
Right.
Jerry is intentionally making it sound like he has no interest in Nora Chandler at all.
Which is interesting because he has to think that she tried to murder him.
Oh, he does think he tried to.
Yeah, I
he
mean,
does think she tried to
yeah.
murder him, but
Right.
he has a vested interest in making sure the police don't know that yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because that's the next scene
Right.
is Nora and Jerry meet outside a restaurant that has, I guess, a koi pond or whatever.
No, I thought it was like a zoo restaurant. I'm like, what's going on in California? There's like a peacock there. I don't know if there's a peacock or not, but in my mind, they're like walking over a bridge. It looks like an arboretum, but it is a restaurant with a valet parking situation.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening there, but yeah, they meet in secret out in the open, and she's again wearing a headscarf to try to keep in disguise from fans recognizing her.
From fans recognizing her, and she completes the ensemble with a couple of stop signs on her face for sunglasses.
She does. And so that whole exchange is a battle of the blackmail, where Jerry is basically saying to her, first of all, both entirely callous people. Let's not forget that Gene did explode in his driveway. This is his fiance.
Yeah, this is the woman that he was going to marry. Yes.
So Gene exploded in his driveway, and he's like, listen, Nora, about this blackmail, you better,
The
I
price
gave
just
you
went up.
The price went up because I thought you were just swindling from the studio. He's like, you just tried to murder me. Now, why this guy wouldn't want to have the police pursue her because his fiance was murdered shows his character, which leads to her blackmail of him, which I call out. I'm going to say her blackmail, but then I have something to say about it. Her blackmail of him is that you're a cad, you're penniless, you use women, you were using Gene. I saw all those love letters between you, and you're broke, and you just use women left and right. Is that really the extent of her blackmail?
Just that one little bit further is that he was borrowing money from Gene personally.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it's not just you use women and you borrow money. You're borrowing money from Gene to pay your ex-wives because you owe them alimony.
Okay.
And that becomes a motive for killing Gene because she could have decided to either call him out on it publicly or stop paying him, or he didn't technically do anything illegal by borrowing money, but she might have gotten mad. It's weak. But
it's weak because he's basically every deadbeat boyfriend, you know? So he's like every deadbeat boyfriend. That's not something, let's just say these blackmails don't match. He's accusing her. He's like, I have dirt. I know you stole the equivalent of $14 million from a studio. Right. And I'm also pretty sure you killed your husband 12 years ago. And she's like, you're a terrible boyfriend.
Well, the husband 12 years ago, that didn't really come up.
That didn't come up then.
No, but it was certainly, you stole $14 million from the movie industry that you still work in.
Right.
And I just borrowed money because I'm a bad boyfriend. So, yes, it definitely. Oh, and I do think that you killed your assistant trying to kill me. So
that's it. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
That's actually what I meant to say. He's like, sorry. The two big blackmails from him were you've stolen $14 million and you tried to kill me and accidentally killed beloved Gene.
Yes.
Who no one's shedding a tear over, by the way.
No, because, by the way, I just added that. He actually did just say, the implication was you tried to kill me. He doesn't care that you tried to kill me and accidentally killed a completely innocent person. Right. He was just more like, you tried to kill me, not you successfully did kill your secretary.
That's
accidentally.
Right. Yeah. This is
Gene is out of the picture. Gene is already long forgotten by both of these horrible, horrible people.
They're horrible people. It's an episode where it's sort of like behind the scenes Hollywood, and it's like, oh well, this is just reinforcing all the stereotypes about Hollywood, but they're just all despicable people, I guess.
Completely narcissistic.
Yeah.
Despicable.
Yeah. So that's that scene, and then Columbo shows up.
Yes.
Right? Is that what happens? Columbo just shows up.
Basically, what happens is he was following Jerry.
Right.
And then when he got out, he saw that Nora's car was there.
Right.
So he was following Jerry, caught them both there. And yes, that's what happened, is that he kind of interrupts that little scene And so he basically says, "Hey, what do you two doing talking together? I thought you didn't like each other." Just a whole scene of them suddenly having to shift gears back into frenemies,
Right.
and just explaining how superficial Hollywood is. And Columbo said, "Well, I thought that you were getting together to talk about who would have, what happened as far as, you both trying to decide, hey, who could have wanted to kill Jerry, because I noticed that you were upset."
Yes,
So
did
he
say
had
that.
seen from far enough away, he had seen that they were having this argument and were upset, and
Right.
wanted to let them know that he knew. A lot of good hints that he's throwing out there that she's just either not picking up on, or they're just not making it very obvious. This was not like a lot of other episodes where he'd say, "Well, if it were me, I would have booked a plane," and then there's a big camera zoom on Cassidy's face, and he's like, "Oh no, I made a mistake." This is
There's
a lot
none
more.
of that.
There's
None of that in this episode. And he does give a bunch of zingers, but like there's none of that at least registering on their faces.
Yes. I mean, the biggest one was him turning to look at her, saying the killer made a terrible mistake, and he looks right at her.
Mm-hmm.
But there really wasn't the zoom on her face. We just see her sitting emotionless, so we know there's an issue. And so at the end of that, then Jerry gets a great line where he says, "Oh yes," referring to Nora, "her dear departed husband would be spinning in his grave if he had one."
Right.
Because that's when we kind of remember that the body was really never found.
Right. Yeah. That's sort of like a second plot line that's pretty heavily buried. It's just like, as you're watching everything unfold, then you're just reminded, it's like, oh yeah, she has a dead husband.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It just kind of floats to the surface a little here or there.
Yeah.
Now we're at another instant fake out scene where Nora's getting interrogated by police with some really horrible acting. That detective, I mean, he's obviously normally a good actor, but he was, directed to just be like bad TV acting.
Do you think he's just like playing that character like that? I don't think it's out of the realm for someone to act like that.
I want to give him the benefit of the doubt because it's pretty bad. On the other hand, to be fair, there were two different police officers who forgot their lines halfway through saying it. So maybe,
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe it was just bad. I don't know. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he can't defend himself. He's long gone. And then we see, yes, this is in fact on the set again, where she's being interrogated for murder. And this is where we find out from that wonderful on-set props guy that she usually only has some, alcohol when she's feeling stressed. So she's having a hard time getting through this scene. I think that's because this scene took place not that long after the confrontation at the restaurant, right? Like, I don't think this is the next day, right? I don't
think it's the next day either.
Yeah. So I think that's why she's having a hard time, because she realizes that kind of Parks is onto her as well as possibly Columbo. So she's either way, no matter how you look at it, she's having a rough time of it. And that's when we find out that she, got that thermos that the props guy told Columbo has got a little vodka in it or a little something in it, and that she only drinks when she's stressed. And the makeup guy even comments about how she's perspiring as he's, and of course that was after Columbo had shown up. So, not only is she going through all this, but now Columbo's showing up and making noise and interrupting.
He knocks over a ladder. Is that the one where he knocks over a ladder?
He doesn't quite knock it over. I think that was the Dr. Lucerne, Phil Lucerne one. But he's messing with the ladder. There's no question. I don't think he knocks it completely over, but he moves.
It doesn't fall, but he knocks it over and he catches it.
It makes a noise.
Scene. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a noise. That's for sure. It makes enough of a noise that he gets shushed for it. So while she's getting her makeup reapplied and taking a nice little shot off her thermos, Columbo goes outside with Fallon, the studio boss, who would rather deal with Columbo than have him, keep messing with their shots. And so they once again get in the old golf carts that are seen in now a lot of episodes, where they want to have an explanation and some background information, some exposition, without having two people just stand there talking. So that's good. Yeah. Now on movie sets they do use golf carts on movie sets, so at least it makes a lot more sense than the chemical company. Yeah, where he would have to drive 45 minutes to get to the other end of the place or go up 42 flights and light a cigar. Anyway, that's what we find out. And the only real point of the scene, other than the pointless, oh, you're too young to be ahead of the studio joke, is that Nora got her house on the main lot because she was married, of course, to the guy who had been in charge of all of this.
Mhm.
And that she's, even though the company is on the brink of bankruptcy, she's refusing to sell that house, even the backyard of that house. Like
Right.
she's not even willing to sell a quarter of that half acre, you know, just so that they could subdivide. Basically, he's annoyed with her because she refuses to sell the house, and they feel that they can make a lot of money by not just that lot, but I think just by subdividing everything.
He said it's valuable real estate, and half acre is a big plot of land, even for a home in a suburb.
Yeah.
And this is on a movie set. I mean, a
Yeah.
movie studio lot. So
Yeah.
that's a huge piece of property. And he did make it a point to say she won't even, like you said, she wouldn't even sell the backyard, and it would be subdivided. Yeah.
Something else to file away, because the first time you watch it, that doesn't mean anything. Really.
Right.
You know, that's like another, why did we see the scene?
Right.
So she doesn't want to sell her house, so what? But the next scene is now with Edith Head,
Yes.
world-renowned designer. And so before we get to the scene, just a couple little fun facts about Edith Head in this scene. In the office, she has 7 Oscars on the desk.
Okay.
Those are all her actual Oscars.
I believe it.
And one of them was for All About Eve, where
Oh.
and so she met Ann Baxter on that, and they became, you know, they were good friends that whole time. So they were friends for this episode and beyond, of course. And she was going to win her 8th and final Oscar years after this for her design, for her clothing design in the movie The Sting.
Oh.
And Peter Falk presented the Oscar to her at that award ceremony for The
That's
Sting.
so great. I wonder if they were all sort of like friends in real life. That's great.
I'm not sure. I'd like to think that there's that there was a connection there, but because it would be kind of coincidental for Peter Falk to given her the award. But I just thought that was pretty neat.
I love that.
A mini one more thing, but we'll keep going with this. Now, Columbo is, and I don't know how he knew she was there, if he was just simply told that or followed her, but he is basically going into Edith Head's office to meet Nora Chandler again.
Yes.
And she calls him out at ogling the models, which
Yeah.
again, it's like, hey, that's not Columbo. He shouldn't have been staring at the pretty girls like that. He should have been averting his eyes as he was walking through. So
That's true. That was a little off. Yeah, there was like that mermaid one that was like he was really staring at when she was walking through the hall. There was
yeah,
one that was just like a mermaid. He was really staring at her. So you're right.
it's like, wait a minute,
That was a bit of a
got-
departure. Yeah.
that's not Columbo, but I guess it was for that episode. The main focus of the scene, other than some really, really good little zingers, is that this is where Nora confesses to Columbo that Jerry Parks has a lot of secrets that she didn't want to get out.
Yeah.
And that Jerry was lying to Columbo when he didn't have any secrets. And the idea is she wanted to finesse Columbo into getting a subpoena for Jerry's files.
Right.
That was basically the proof that she had swindled $2 million from the studio. That was an important part of that scene. But then the fun part is, of course, she asked Edith Head for a new tie for Columbo.
Yeah.
So she gives him this, he's got this thin, narrow, either brown or black tie. And so now she gave him this really vibrant yellow on orange wide tie.
It's so funny because it's like he's got a thin, I think it's like black or gray tie. And that's very reminiscent of probably like the 60s. So that's how out of date his clothing is. And then she's like, here, put on this garish, horrible sunflower-esque, giant, wide, almost clown tie. And that's like what you should be wearing in the 70s, which is kind of true. It is right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just in the 80s and 90s, that narrow black gray tie would have come back again.
Yeah, it comes back.
As they were getting set to leave, it was the, he, of course, swaps ties back and said, hey, can I save this for a fancy occasion and give me my other tie back?
Right.
Why don't you get your wife to take you on a shopping tour for your anniversary, huh? Take a look at some suits, some shirts, slacks, socks. Hey, look at some raincoats while you're at it.
now we go into Jerry's office, I guess. I guess the time just kind of skips to him obviously having a warrant or a subpoena. And it is Columbo, Jerry Parks in his own office as they kind of go through the files. Nora and Simmons.
Yeah, Frank
like
Simmons.
Those are the people that are in the room. She forces Jerry to give the information that proves that she, the ledgers basically, that she had swindled the $2 million from the company.
Jerry's reticent to do so because that is part of his blackmail.
Yeah.
So he really doesn't want to give up any of these secrets because he's like, he told Columbo the day prior that he doesn't even care about Nora Chandler.
Right.
He was just dating Jean. That's their only connection at this point. And he doesn't want any of this information getting out because now he's watching all those dollar signs go smaller and smaller and smaller because he's got less to blackmail her on as he's revealing, as they have a warrant to go through his files on her.
Yeah, and it is funny because they have a warrant to go through his files, but like Columbo never searched the drawer. It was still in the drawer. It's like you make him show you, and it's like, well, I guess you better show us. And he's reached in and pulled out the ledgers. So it's like, how was that warrant executed? Just like on his word. And of course, the new studio head, the guy that bought the old studio, Mr. Simmons, is right there, and Columbo shows him the ledger and he tears it up. And Columbo says it's evidence, but technically it's not because he doesn't care about it. It's only evidence if he wants to press charges against her for this fraud, and he doesn't.
Right.
So Mr. Simmons is saying, hey, this is nothing. She told me about it 10 days ago, and we made other arrangements.
And that means he just bought her for $14 million as far as he bought her hand in marriage for $14 million.
Yeah.
Also, another thing I want to say about Frank Simmons is he should be the actress because he is the most dramatic person in this entire episode. He's making these bold declarations. He's got a lot of emotion. That is a very dramatic studio head.
Yes. He again says, okay, now in the 10th of a second that you found out that this is no longer a crime that matters because I don't care about it.
Yes.
If you bother Nora anymore, you're going to have to answer to me. Again, what does that mean?
I don't know, an empty threat. Yeah.
But he does get a good line himself.
And, Lieutenant, as for you, you have an obtuse manner which some people find ingratiating. I do not. Do you follow me?
Yes, sir.
That's probably what the innocent person's version of Columbo would be.
So, I have a question with this 10-day thing.
Yes.
Because he's got to be lying. I'm assuming Frank's lying that Nora told him to. This is what part I couldn't figure out, right?
Okay.
So if, as an audience member watching it this far, at least this far, not how it all unfolds, we find out different information. But at this point, let's say we're watching it live real time. The big reveal is that Nora has already removed whatever quote unquote leverage that Jerry could have over her in terms of blackmail with the studio, getting in trouble with the studio, because she has already told her studio boyfriend, Frank Simmons, that she swindled the studio out of a lot of money. And he's like, yeah, that's fine with me. I love you. We're going to do a partnership. It's fine. Right. But then it doesn't make sense that she would agree in the very beginning of the episode to pay Jerry what he was blackmailing her with, because in the very beginning of the episode, right after we see that him and Jean are together it looks like a kitchen, Jerry blackmails her with this threat of exposing her for stealing from the studio, which was 2 days ago, not 10 days ago.
Right. And
so why should she care?
Right.
At that point. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, because at that point, if she had told the truth and said, well, if she's telling the truth, if this is all truthful, like you said, up to this point,
right.
And that means that 8 days ago, she would have told Simmons the truth. Right. When Jerry came in to blackmail it, she'd say, go ahead. Tell anyone you want. I already made good with this guy. You're not getting a cent out of me.
Right.
And she almost could have even had the old, and I'll see to it that he ruins your career to boot. Right. That guy is also very powerful.
Right. That would be a real threat to Jerry, not a real threat to Columbo. But if you have to answer to me and you're a guy who works in this town, that is a true threat. So,
no, you're right. I don't know if Frank is lying about the 10 days. I guess by definition, he'd kind of have to be. I feel like.
Let's talk about it again in about 5 minutes when we get to how this episode ends. Because let's put a pin in that, because I have thoughts on why he may actually be telling the truth.
Because we are actually, believe it or not, close to the end here.
Okay.
We have this scene. Basically, Columbo is left wondering what's going on. It looks like Jerry now has nothing, even though he's saying, well, I might have something. And everybody's like, no, you don't. Shut up, idiot.
Right.
So now Columbo is back in Nora Chambers' house while she's getting dressed and he's out by the bar. And this time he calls his wife alone. So it's not like he's putting on a show. And to me, this is, if anybody ever had any question or any doubt about her existing, that's thrown out the window, because he would have been doing it for nobody. It's not like and that's when he finds out from his brother-in-law, George, that one of Nora's movies on that he didn't know about. So he watches the show, and in that show, that movie, and that's probably why I had the vision in my mind, Nora is wearing a large brimmed fedora and trench coat and a tie. She basically is definitely dressed like a man.
Yeah, I mean, she's dressed like Humphrey Bogart.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she looks like.
Yep, absolutely. Because you could tell it was supposed to, even though it was obviously shot that same week, it was supposed to be more in the 40s and maybe early 50s.
Right.
It was black and white. It was definitely a noir movie.
This whole episode, the plot of this episode is very film noir.
Yes.
I mean, it's not shot film noir at all. So by definition, it's not film noir. But the plot that usually goes along with the film noir theme is absolutely film noir to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I would certainly agree. You've got that kind of damsel in distress who really is a dangerous, dangerous woman.
Yes.
You have a lot of that. Then we see the most obvious Jessica Fletcher-ish, let me think about this. Like, they really dragged it out, like he's staring at the ceiling. It's like, hey, folks, if you were paying even halfway attention, Columbo finds this incredibly important, that he could dress up like a guy.
They could have sidestepped all of it and just did like a cartoon animation close to his head of like gears turning, and then they could have saved an extra 5 seconds off this whole scene, because that's what it was. It was like we're watching him think real time what this is.
Yes.
But the big epiphany is that he's literally smacked in the face. It's like, oh, she dressed like a man and can pass as a man, which is also preposterous, because Ann Baxter is very clearly a lady in that scene dressed as a man. She's wearing a trench coat and a hat, but a full face of makeup, and still speaks like a lady. So I'm like, I don't know. It just looks like a lady in like a masculine outfit. Yeah,
that's all it was, because the raincoat was practically form-fitting too. So it's not even like it fell loosely on her. She was clearly, she looked like Carmen Sandiego. It's like we finally found her.
That's exactly what she looked like. You're right.
So Nora joins him at the TV. That's when Columbo tells her, hey, the tire was definitely intentionally flattened, but it wasn't vandalized because it was intact and not damaged. Somebody basically just let the air out of the tire and then replaced the cap. So he lets her know the very bad news is that he knows that Jean was the intended target after all, that it was intentionally, a car was intentionally sabotaged so that she would have to take Jerry's car, and she was the intended victim. And he even says what was never stated up to this point, and that is somebody who was going to light the fire would certainly have seen who was behind the wheel of the car driving up.
That's right.
He basically said if it was Jerry as the victim, we could never solve this because everybody wants to kill him.
He did say that. He had a lot of enemies in town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Jean, I mean, look, only you and Jerry knew where she was going that night. Yeah. So he's basically saying he's now narrowed the suspects to her and Jerry immediately.
That's a short list.
Yeah, that's a really short list when one of them was blown up in your own driveway, and that would look probably ridiculous if you were the killer. So a very short list. Because of that, she now has to make Jerry look like the intended victim again and does this pathetic kind of drive-by attempt to hit him, but not actually touching him. At this point, my question is, why didn't you just kill him for real? I don't
know. Well, I guess if she killed him for real, then that was done. That'd be pretty risky, right? Because then it's like, whose car did she use this time? There would be blood on that car.
That's true.
Then she'd have to take off. Like she did that, by the way. She did that. Maybe I have the scenes wrong, but didn't she do that in between takes while filming?
Yes. Yes, she
So
did.
she's on set filming,
Yes.
and then she's like, "Hold on, everybody, I just got to step out for a moment." And she wraps her head in that headscarf again and puts on sunglasses, steals another crew member's car from the lot because we know that they keep the keys in the car,
Right.
and goes to fake run him over. So maybe
Yeah.
it was just an issue of time. Because
but
if
I
she
think
actually was going to kill him, she'd be held up a little bit longer.
it would take a little longer, but no, you're right. Then there'd be evidence all over the car. It would be dented, whereas not touching him gave the illusion that he was the victim without tracing it back to that car. So that does make sense.
And then she went right back to set.
Yeah. Went right back to work, where she's sitting in half a car with a movie screen behind her,
Yep.
pretending that she's driving. Again, kind of a low budget production. And Columbo, at the scene where he was almost run over, just all of a sudden just starts asking if anybody's got a Shriner's ring.
Yes.
So this was a callback to the very beginning when he first saw that Nora's late husband was wearing a Shriner's ring in the photo. Columbo does track one down and then barges onto the set. He's not the timid Columbo tiptoeing around the set. He just literally walks right up, walks in front of the screen. Everyone's yelling at him, and he just says, "Hey, official business." He goes to Nora, who's still sitting in that car, and says, "Jerry Parks, somebody tried to run him over with a car." But then he pretends that he was hit by the car, or at least when diving out of the way, got a concussion.
Yeah.
And is not waking up and not talking. And he dumps into her hand an envelope with the Shriner's ring in it, and the envelope has NC written on it. He asked her, did she know anything about this ring? And she said, no, I have no idea.
And she did say those are my initials, but I have no idea about the ring.
And that's right. Columbo had said that the ambulance people found this in his pocket. She then makes another excuse to leave, and this time just runs all the way to her home, which I know wasn't that far away, but she runs the whole way, runs in through the house. She doesn't even turn on the light. It's dark. She runs all the way to the back patio to throw open the door, and that's when Columbo turns on the lights. And they do like their let's turn on a whole bunch of lights to startle the killer.
Yeah, it was like a spotlight. They put on all the lights, and she turns around really quickly, and now she's got a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah, now she's got some splaining to do, which is funny because if, of course, there wasn't the evidence there, we might as well just say it at this point. The real motive that she wanted to hide from Jerry was that she did, in fact, kill her husband. He did not go on a boat ride. She dressed up to look like him, left on a boat, wrecked the boat, came back, and buried, well, before that happened, that was the cover-up.
That's the cover-up, but they got into an argument because he was a womanizer.
Right.
And she was upset, and so they got into an argument. She threw a wine bottle at him, and it killed him. Him and him killed him.
Then she panicked and buried him in the backyard. And then the very next day, she got the prop with the fountain to put it on top of it. And that's why the fountain never worked, because they would have to dig up the yard to connect pipes to get water to the fountain.
And which is why it's also why she would never be able to sell that property, because if everyone dug it up, they're going to find her husband.
That's right.
In the backyard.
That's right. And these are all things that Columbo just kind of went through bit by bit. He pulled out his little notebook and was just kind of tearing through the pages. And so he knew at that point that Jean was the target. He knew that he saw her on that movie dressed like a man. He was thinking about, that's maybe what happened 12 years ago. Right. And he used the Shriner's ring to scare her into thinking that somehow the body had gotten exhumed and that Jerry had found out about it. And that's the little thing he was holding back for blackmail. And that's why she rushed home to run out there and see it.
Right. Yeah, she admits it, but it's very funny because at the very tail end, she goes through, what happened that night. The history of their marriage and why she was upset and the whole thing, the murder and the cover up. And it's like one quick throwaway line. She's just like, and Jean knew about it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like they never go into like, well, how would Jean know about it? Why would Jean know that? I mean, did she have Jean like order a fountain to cover her dead husband because she's her personal assistant? Like, why would Jean know about a fight that ended up with him dead and him in the backyard.
The only thing that makes sense is because if she was her personal assistant for that long, because she was her assistant 6 years before he disappeared. Right. For all I know, she had Gene dig the hole. I mean, she had Gene do everything. So my guess is that Gene was probably in the house that night and overheard. But we don't know. That is speculation on our part. Somehow Jean knew, whether Nora told Jean as she was panicking, like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? It was an accident. I didn't mean to kill him, but he's dead. What do I do?
He was dating a lot of like the actresses, and Nora never really minded. And then all of a sudden, because it was sort of a marriage of convenience, I guess. And then all of a sudden Nora, or transactional anyway, she wanted to become a bigger star, and he needed her. And all of a sudden Nora did love him and was getting really annoyed that he kept on dating all these actresses, and he had the nerve to bring one of them home, and that was the last. That was the fight. That was the last straw. Yeah. And in my head, that person was like a young star like Jean, and then she took Jean under her wing as her assistant. That I remembered that I made up an entire thing that didn't exist. That did not happen. That actually
would have been quite a bit better, because that would have been a good reason for why Jean was willing to cover up a murder.
That'd be why they both wouldn't keep their mouths shut. Yeah.
Why on earth did Jean know that this woman was a murderer, even though it was an accident, but still that she covered up the fact that she killed him?
I don't know how much of an accident that is. It's not an accident that it's not like they were both fighting with each other. You know what? Here, I want to bring this up. Nora threw a wine bottle at him because she was mad. That's not really an accident.
If I could even stop you further, she said, I hit him with the bottle. We don't know that she threw it. Oh. Because she might have just grabbed it and, she Lily Lucerned him with it.
No, because that's a good point, because this is what I would bring up earlier. It's like one of the first minute of the episode when Jerry is blackmailing her in the beginning, which is why I have a question about the 10-day situation.
Right.
When Jerry's blackmailing her in the beginning, he calls her a has-been to her. He calls her an aging actress to her face, and she goes to hit him.
Yes.
She goes to smack him. So she's got a temper.
That's what I wanted to say even earlier on, so I'm glad that you brought it up again. This was an episode that may be convoluted, but it was fair.
Yeah.
They had everything in there. We knew that she had a temper if the right button was pushed, because she didn't care if she was being blackmailed.
She was mad that he called her old. So that's why she wanted to go hit him, not for anything else. That's why she wanted to go hit him.
Yeah. She didn't care that he was blackmailing her for being an embezzler. She wanted to slap him across the face for saying that she was, an aging actress, which she was. Right. So that was there. All these little clues, the fountain that didn't work, the fact that she didn't want to sell the house, even the back lot, which would have been the worst thing for her to have sold. She would have been better off selling the house, but keeping that other lot.
Right. But then how do you explain it? It's like, no, I want to keep this lot and this water fountain, but you can level my home.
But that's right. You can do whatever else you want with the house. Yeah. And what I wanted to bring up about the picture was she said that picture was taken the day before he died. Well, how did she know the day he died? She should have said the day he went missing.
Right, the day he disappeared.
His boat was found wrecked, but it wasn't found wrecked the next day necessarily. So that was just a little bit of a slip. But, I mean, Columbo doesn't bring it up, so I don't know if it was a slip in the script or if it was just a slip that he already had enough little things there. But she shouldn't have known exactly when he died.
This was a cool episode because we really didn't I think we had an idea of the motive, but we had to wait pretty long to really find out exactly what was going on through Nora's head.
Yes.
And that's why I want to go back to the beginning when, again, it's like one of the first scenes where Nora is confronting Jean about dating Jerry. And she's like, he's using you. And Jean is like, no, I'm going to marry him. He's not using me. You're wrong. And she takes a minute.
Yes.
And she cries for a second, because at that point, I think Nora realizes, when I say she cries, Nora's crying for just a split second. And I think Nora realizes that she now has to kill Jean because she has to protect her secret.
Yeah.
Jean telling Jerry that they covered up a murder, or actually Nora covered up a murder.
Yeah, I would agree, because of course the question I had always asked for years is, well, why didn't she just kill Jerry? Why didn't she just flat out kill Jerry? Why would she kill Jean? And I guess for a few reasons. One, I think when she realized, and maybe this is something, and again, that's something that we have to kind of determine for ourselves for fun, was she originally planning to kill Jerry, and then when she realized that Jean was actually in love, she couldn't kill Jerry, because then Jean would be furious. She would know, obviously, if Jerry suddenly exploded in his driveway. she would know that Nora had done it.
Well,
and
yeah,
would
because Nora
then-
has no problem killing people.
Yeah.
So it's not like this would be out of character for her to kill somebody.
Right.
So Jean
And
would
so
know that
it-
she would have killed Jerry. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then would Jean, who now has lost, she thinks, the love of her life,
Mhm.
she'd be a lot sadder about Jerry being murdered than Jerry was about her being murdered.
No kidding. Again, not a tear shed for poor Jean.
Not a one. So, obviously she was worried that Jean would probably tell the police. I guess the idea was Jean's the only other person who knew about the murder. She could kill Jerry. She could kill almost anybody. But if she wants to keep that a secret, she had to kill Jean.
She had to kill Jean. And I do think she liked Jean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she cared about, it was her assistant for 18 years. And, I think she really did care about Jean, but she also did kill her. So.
Yeah. I like your theory on that because it gives at least Nora a moment of humanity, of saying, "Oh man, I really like this person, and I'm going to have to murder her."
Right.
So now, what did you want to say about the 10 days?
So the 10-day thing, if the 10-day thing is true, where Nora had removed the blackmail threat and told her boyfriend Frank that she did steal this money, and let's say Frank is telling the truth, then to me, the only way that would work is that Nora never really cared about that blackmail. She was more watching this secret relationship unfold between Jean and Jerry. And it wasn't until that night that she realized that Jean is very seriously going to marry this guy. And that's been the threat all along. It was never, as an audience member, I think we were led, or a viewer, we were led to believe that the threat was, in the beginning at least, that he was going to blackmail her about the theft.
Yes.
And Frank is telling the truth, and if Nora is telling the truth and he already knew, that was never a threat.
That's
the
right.
only threat, the real and only threat, was the union between Jean and Jerry.
Right.
So that's why I'm like, he could have known. She could have gone to Frank earlier and told him all of this. But then I really don't have a great explanation as to why she was getting rattled with Jerry blackmailing her in the beginning.
I think that they probably were telling the truth because she probably saw with each increasing letter, because she also saw the letter, he proposed in a letter.
Yeah.
So she saw that letter. So that may have been even the day that she just said, okay, the jig is coming up soon. Maybe let me at least take this tooth out of the mouth and let's just let me at least get this blackmail off the table.
Right.
She may have just wanted to act rattled because she was doing a lot of acting during this. There was a lot of her being over the top in a lot of different parts.
Yeah.
And I know she was supposed to be because she was like a Nora Desmond type of character. Right. She may have also just wanted to react the way she thought she should to Jerry so that Jerry thinks that he has something over her just to see where things go. Again, we're putting in a lot of work.
It's a lot. Really okay, so now to sum up this, I always like to get my brain straight, right? To sum up this episode, really what happened is that Nora meant to kill Jean, but we were led to believe throughout most of the episode that she actually meant to kill Jerry.
Yes.
And because why would she ever want to kill Jean? And what's ultimately revealed is her motive for killing Jean is to keep Jean from potentially telling Jerry about a previous murder of her husband.
Yes.
And that's what this is, right?
That's the whole episode. They just held so much of that information from us and fed it to us in little bits here and little bits there. And that's why this is so important that this was just a 1 hour and 15-minute episode instead of one of the 1 hour 40-minute ones, because it would have dragged on too long. The pacing was fast. Every scene you learned a new fact about her past and the present, and every scene progressed the episode. So by the time you got to the end of it, you understood all of it, even if you didn't necessarily guess from watching it in real time. Jerry couldn't have been more murderable if he tried. It was clear. Every other episode of Columbo, he was definitely going to be a victim.
Yes.
And he was.
Yes.
And the motive was blackmail.
Right.
But it was for the wrong crime because she already neutralized that blackmail. And so these are things we didn't find until much later on.
I like this episode a lot.
Columbo was with the killer almost the entire episode, which is nice because there are definitely some where he just kind of shows up at the periphery.
There's a few episodes. I didn't realize how many episodes there are where, I guess because as a viewer, you're sort of, you know what Columbo doesn't yet know. So
Yeah.
you do spend a lot of time with the killer, right?
Yeah.
But in this episode, it was very heavy Columbo and the killer in every scene. I actually really like this episode. This is a very solid episode. I wonder if Edith Head did do the wardrobe design for her in this episode, because she looks, Anne Baxter looks beautiful. And her clothes were dynamite. There's one outfit that I would wear now. She's wearing a navy pantsuit. I don't know how much you care about this. I care about this.
No,
She's
this
wearing
is
a navy pantsuit that's lined in pink satin. And then her pant legs have slits on them. So it almost looks like she's wearing a skirt, but she's not. So each pant leg, every time she walks, flares open, and it's lined in pink satin. And even though it definitely has a 70s style, because it does, it's not that garish, over the top, super trendy 70s style. So I almost wonder if Edith Head, because she's so tasteful, I almost wonder if she did design her clothes.
I don't know. That's a really good question. I'd have to check the credits and see. I think that she was not the head designer on this, that it really was a cameo, but that doesn't mean that she might not still have said, hey, you know, because she and Anne Baxter were friends, so she might have just said, hey, try this. I mean, I really liked, and I don't know if it's the same outfit or not, but where she was wearing navy blue with that one red flare, that one red, you know, almost like a collar, but several inches lower on the chest.
Oh yeah, that's what she wore when she was filming on the on the set.
Yes.
So she wore that dress a lot because that was her filming on set. That's
outfit.
another. I would wear that dress today. That's a beautiful dress.
Again, very nice. So neat, really neat stuff. Really like the episode. I feel like it was one that had to be done a little differently than our usual episodes we talk about, because again, it was released to us in a different way. So
there was a reveal. There was a cascading reveal.
Again, similar to Short Fuse, which makes sense because he wrote that.
Yeah, but Short Fuse was cuckoo bananas in terms of plot.
Yeah.
This is still like it's an intriguing plot, but it's a plot that one could follow, and there's nothing extra thrown in at all. It all makes sense, like you said. Every single thing is there for a reason.
And they didn't have like a person assuming a fake identity, or maybe he wasn't really. I mean, it was just nuts. That was just
right.
So I think in the interest of not making this a 3-hour episode, we might as well go on to our first segment, which is, when did Columbo know?
I kind of knew it right from the start. It was nothing definite. It was a lot of little things. Little things.
So this is a loaded question. This is twofold, in my opinion, because I think, when did he know what? Right? When did he know that, right? When did he know that Nora was the killer? Or when did he know that Jean was the intended victim? Right? Because
let's try and answer both.
Okay, so
because you're right, they're kind of two different things, and really, because if Jerry was the victim, Nora still could have been a suspect for killing Jerry.
Oh, I think we opened this episode with Columbo thinking Nora was a suspect who tried to kill Jerry.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So I'll go to that. I think he knew with that dramatic head turn that Peter Falk had when when Columbo took Nora Chandler to the parking lot to see her dead assistant's exploded car. I think you're right. I think he was provoking her to see her reaction, and he saw it. And I think that's when he knew that she was the killer. And I think he thought that she accidentally killed Jean.
Yes.
So that's when I think.
I would agree completely, because, I mean, he literally said the only reason your poor assistant is dead is because the killer made a terrible mistake last night. Stare at you. Right. So looking at you, Nora. So I agree. I think that's when he really knew that she was the killer. He might have mildly suspected a little bit earlier, but I think that, to me, that's when he really knew she was the killer. And you're right. So now, when did he suspect that Jean was the actual target?
Yeah, because this is a pretty good setup. What Nora did was, she didn't just kill Jean and look like, Jean accidentally, would any other death.
Right.
She did set up she orchestrated the entire thing, that it looked like somebody who was universally hated was the intended target.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of suspects there that could have killed him.
Yeah.
And she set this whole entire thing up to make it look like someone who everybody hates was supposed to be killed, and in a tragic twist of fate, somebody innocent who everybody likes, who would only have two suspects, right, was in fact killed.
Yes.
So it's really calculating and very clever. So when do you think Columbo knew that Jean was the intended target after all?
I'm going to say when he realized that the tire was tampered with.
Oh, because that early. Okay.
Yeah, because not maybe the first time, because he was like, oh, because that was still talked about in the garage.
Yeah.
But I'm saying the second time when he said, somebody let the air out of the tire, because at that point, that's how he knew that's the reason that Jean switched cars.
Okay.
And to me, that's when he knew that, okay, her car was put out of commission, and that led to her accidental death.
Right. So
and therefore, whoever tampered with that tire meant for her to be the killer, and therefore, I'm going to say that's when he knew that she was the intended target.
Okay, so that's when Columbo knew that Jean was the intended target. I have a third question.
Okay.
That I'm going to answer, but then you can answer.
Okay.
When do you think Columbo discovered the motive? Because why on earth would Nora kill Jean, right?
That's good. That's another whole question. Okay,
that's another entirely different question, because it's like, it's one thing to be like, when did he know that Nora was the killer? When did we know who the intended victim was? Because that was sort of like a gotcha. I don't know if it's a gotcha, but it was a surprise, certainly. A twist.
It was certainly a surprise.
It was a twist.
I know the first several times I ever watched this growing up, I, like everybody else, thought that Jerry was supposed to be the intended target, and that she was stunned that she killed accidentally her secretary.
And so her over-the-top fainting would be sincere, because I did accidentally kill this woman who basically grew up in front of my eyes as my assistant for the past 2 decades. So then the next question would be, when did he figure out the motive? And I think that was pretty late. And I think that was when he was watching the movie of Nora dressed up like Humphrey Bogart.
Yes. And I would agree with you there as well, because I think that they, first of all, they literally took 10 seconds out of the episode to show. So right off the bat, they wanted it to be there. And I really do think that I think he already knew she was the killer. I think he already knew Jean was the target. And then he kept saying, as he was reading through his notebook, why? Jean has a secret. She can't tell that secret. What is that secret? Right. And I think when he saw that old movie with Nora dressed up as a man, he figured out the secret.
Right. And then all the pieces do come together.
Yeah.
And it's really awful. It's very sad.
Yeah.
This is a sad one. This is in terms of, because Jean they also make her very likable as a character.
They do, because they don't give her a lot of screen time. No. Again, as a victim, she didn't get a lot of screen time, but you got the idea that she was really, I mean, look, all we know about her is that she was loyal enough to Nora to help her to continue to cover up a murder that happened 12 years ago.
Right.
That she was being clearly used by this piece of garbage who just collects women and takes money from them, and then just for more secrets out of her.
Right.
And after she died, nobody gave a damn.
Nobody cared. I mean, at least Jerry. The only reason that Jerry got upset at all when discussing Jean is he was offended that Nora was making fun of his love letters to her.
Yeah. Yeah, that was when he got upset. Yes.
That's when he got upset. So Nora didn't care about being blackmailed, but she didn't like being called an aging actress.
Right.
And Jerry really didn't care about Jean, but he was like, hey, don't make fun of my letters. Watch it.
Yeah.
Watch you making fun of my melodramatic, sappy love letters to Jean.
Yes. To the woman that I clearly was using and don't care that she's dead.
Right.
You know.
So again, Nora was right. So this goes back to what we talked about earlier. Would this all go incredibly differently in the very beginning of the episode, where Nora confronted Jean about not marrying this guy because he is using you, and you don't see it. He's using you. And here's how I know he's using you. I happen to know for a fact that he's writing this book about me, and he just blackmailed me. He just blackmailed me. While you stepped outside for 2 seconds and I tried to hit him. He did just blackmail me. Yeah. And if she said that, I don't know if Jean would believe it or not. You would think that if Jean knew that she murdered her husband, she would certainly know that Nora also embezzled $14 million.
Right. Oh, no. I think she knew that secret, too. There's no reason she wouldn't have known that secret.
Maybe
So
that's how Jerry found out that secret, honestly. Maybe Jean did tell him,
maybe,
you know?
maybe Jean was cautious enough to not talk about murder,
Right.
but did spill that other secret. That is certainly possible. I think that Nora would have to prove to Jean that she's being blackmailed by Jerry. I don't think she would believe her at her word. So I don't know. I mean, back then they couldn't record on the phone. Every recording device takes up like an entire tabletop.
Well, she could call that private eye from the Crucial Game.
That's right. And then she could just hear a loud hum every time she picks up the phone. Yeah, I think that she wouldn't have believed her
Right.
because she was too much in love. And I think somehow Nora would have to get tangible proof
Right.
that Jerry is blackmailing Nora, and I don't think that she would be able to. So I think ultimately it was destined to end this way. What I don't know is why didn't Nora, after all this time, just dig up what had to be a skeleton after 12 years and just dump it in the water or something? I mean, that would have been the better way to avoid all of that.
Well, instead of killing your assistant and risking all of this, I did think that. I'm like, why wouldn't she just like dig it all up? But then it is on a movie studio lot, so that isn't just like it's not just like the privacy of your backyard, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't think of a reason. That's the only thing I think of is there's a lot more eyes around than there would be in like your normal little neighborhood.
Yeah, I guess I figure if you could bury a guy, you could probably exhume him too.
If you could bury him, you could dig him up. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know because now she's got this fountain on top of it. So that's true. She would have to somehow move the fountain. So that probably would have been a lot harder to do. Okay. So now I guess we get to, will it hold up in court?
Ooh.
Tell me, Doctor, how do you catch a man like that?
You don't?
You're probably right.
Well, I can go first on this one if
Yeah.
you want. I think it's a lot of little tangible things. I think circumstantially it would, but I think most importantly, he just gets a warrant for her backyard and finds her husband's corpse back there. And it doesn't matter what happened to Jean, because once again, no one gives a damn what happens
No
to
one
Jean.
cares about Jean.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think this one would hold up in court. Well, okay, if we go on the idea, this always comes up too. If we go on the idea that there is an outright confession.
Yes.
I mean, she did confess. Well, I guess she really just confessed to killing her husband.
That's true. She didn't confess to killing Jean, did she?
Well, no, she just ended it with "and Jean knew," and then it was the credits.
Yeah,
so, I mean, they
okay.
walked out, but like,
Yeah,
I guess she didn't really confess to killing Jean. I think it would hold up in court only because they did a lot of lab testing in this episode. They floated a tire to make sure there was no holes in it ahead of time to see why it would go flat for no reason. I have a feeling this one would hold up in court because he has the warrant to find out about that she was actually getting blackmailed. And so I don't know. I think there's a lot there. I think you can connect all of these dots this time around. I guess it is circumstantial, though.
It is circumstantial in Jean's case, but it really is true that once we found out Jean was the intended victim, there were literally two suspects.
Right.
And the one, if you have one suspect who's being blackmailed and the victim knows that you murdered somebody else, which would come up in court because they would dig up her ex-husband or her husband, and one is a blackmailer who would benefit far more from everybody staying alive and out of jail.
Right.
I think it's pretty clear, so I feel comfortable saying that she would probably get prosecuted for Jean, but she would definitely get convicted for her husband.
She is getting convicted for her husband. The other thing with the Jean death is that if we were really getting down to two possible suspects, it is really only one suspect, which is Nora, because Jerry, I believe, wasn't home because he was fixing Jean's car, her flat.
Well, it's very interesting.
Oh, no, the book kid did it. The kid
yes.
Did it. That's right. He did.
Which I thought was a great touch, a great
touch.
throwaway line, that this guy's such a pompous elitist creep that he wouldn't even change a tire. He'd get a kid from the bookstore to do it.
But he was busy at the bookstore when she was getting blown up, I thought.
No, I think you're right. I think because, again, the timing was so quick.
Yeah.
Like she raced away after doing the flat.
Right.
And so it only took just long enough for Jean to realize her car is a flat, go back in, tell Jerry about it, and he's saying, okay, take my car, and taking off. And then, bam, she was already there. I mean, to not have enough time to pour out a full second can of gas, that was cutting it close.
That was cutting it very close. Yeah, I do think this one would hold up in court.
All right. So now we come to the part of the show where we rate people on a sympathy meter.
You know what I'm going to say on this one.
I think I do. On the scale of Ruth Gordon, our most sympathetic murderer, to Dick Van Dyke, our most vicious.
I'm beginning to be very fond of you, Lieutenant. I think you're a very kind man.
Don't count on that.
Where would we place Nora Chandler?
She is ice cold. I think she's I don't know why I find her likable. Like, I just like her.
That's my problem.
Right?
That was my problem when I was thinking about it.
Here's why. Okay, I'm going to put her very close to Dick Van Dyke.
Right.
And it is because she killed someone who she did seem to like, and everybody liked Jean. And she's killed her in a
pretty horrible way.
It's a horrible way. I'm going to put her close to Dick Van Dyke because she killed Jean and everybody likes Jean and she herself liked Jean. And it seemed there were other options before murder. Right. And it was entirely self-serving. Was Nora backed into a corner a little bit? Yeah. You know, there was an imminent threat, but she could have at least waited until they got married and he did actually come to her with this blackmail of a dead husband, because then she could just take them both out. What does she care?
That's
you know, but she kind of did a preemptive strike.
Yeah.
Which I think is that's a big risk to take with somebody else's life.
It is. And also, like I said, she had no problem diffusing the one blackmail by confessing.
Right.
Confessing to a $2 million theft in 72. So
that was not such a big confess because she knew she had that guy wrapped around her finger.
Yeah, but you know what? A guy like that, money means a lot. That was still a 50-50 shot that he would have just said, well, maybe I'll grab another starlet, you know.
Right. I'll grab another aging starlet.
Yeah. So the fact is that she diffused the one blackmail. I'm also going to put her close to Dick Van Dyke, but the problem I have is I do like her. I don't know if it's just because Ann Baxter is so charismatic that you just like her anyway.
That's right.
Or if they had written her character in a way that, yes, she did this horrible thing, but then acted in a completely different way. Like, it was almost like it was out of character for her to do either murder, except they showed those little hints, that flare of temper, that flare of narcissism, you know.
Right. No, it's true. And, like, it's funny because even on the behind the scenes, it's not like she was a diva. Like, you know, the whole episode is centered around her also being an actress. So, of course, she's acting on set and everybody likes her on set. Like, she's likable.
Yes.
But maybe that's what makes her a true actress, right? Because maybe all of that's an act.
I mean, it's entirely possible. And I think it would have to be if you could literally burn alive somebody who's been serving you for 18 years. I mean, thank goodness the car exploded, because otherwise that would have been a much worse death.
Right.
And it was still terrible. And as Nora must have seen that it was Jean behind the wheel, which is what she'd intended to have happen. Jean must have also seen Nora. I don't know if that's why she honked her horn when she was coming up, because there would have been no reason to honk the horn.
That's what I wanted to ask you too. They made it a point. The horn honked. So I don't know if that was just a device for
to
us
open the garage door, maybe.
I don't know. Yeah, I was gonna say to like speed along the scene to be like, oh look, she's coming, but like you would see the headlights. So I don't know. I don't know why she honked the horn. Like you said, maybe it was because she saw Nora.
I mean, I have to wonder, because she knew it wasn't Jerry, because she left him at the bookstore and has the only functioning car at that moment. So she wasn't honking to let Jerry know she was there.
Right.
There was no other reason for her to honk, except, like, I do know that there were some devices on garage doors where you honk the horn and the garage door opens up.
I don't remember there being a garage. I thought it was a carport.
It was strange. It was a carport, but it had a door. So it was it was open on other sides, but it had a door on top, because I just remember seeing the door up on top and burned.
Oh, so then maybe.
I mean, I'd like to think that, because otherwise she's like, hey, it's my boss, and boom.
She's like, hey, I got your dress. That's why I was running around. Here it is. Because that was one of the errands she sent her on to get her
It
dress.
was the only one that she did, because it was the only one that couldn't wait until the next day. But and even so, that's when she found out that Jerry talked her out of the errands. So that she could throw the party. Nora even said, oh, she never had a mind of her own. So this woman was really just kind of doomed.
Oh, yeah. Poor Jean.
Yeah.
She's just a nice girl in the wrong industry.
Yeah. So I have to reluctantly put her close to Dick Van Dyke because of all the reasons you said. Yeah. But for the reason you said, she's likable. Like if it's sympathy, I have none for her. If it is likability versus viciousness, I mean, I don't think she was vicious. I just think she was ice cold. I feel like she was like the female Robert Culp, where he was just completely ice cold, like she could have been Inspector Brimmer. Just completely, completely ice cold.
Also, I do feel like the justification for this murder wasn't as imminent. There were plenty of other motives for murder where it's like, you got to take care of this and you got to take care of it now. Right now. Yeah. That's not what was really happening here. I didn't think so anyway. I think she could have waited it out a bit.
Yeah, I think so. It does seem very preemptive, like you said. Like she really wanted to just kind of drone strike this before it became a problem. and in doing so, it was her own downfall too.
Right.
All right. Well, that was very good. So I would say the only thing left at this point is to say thank you for listening. And
one more thing.
Oh, yes.
Did you know that Anne Baxter and Anne Bancroft are two different people? Because I didn't.
I did, in fact, know that, yes.
I didn't. I always thought this was Anne Bancroft. I thought they were the same people as I was watching this episode. In my defense, they're approximately the same age. Uh-huh. They have the same initials. They don't look anything alike.
No.
Upon going back in time, I'm like, oh, they are two different women. But their hair is kind of similar.
Uh-huh.
So what I'm doing is we're going to play a quiz. You get to answer the questions. I'm going to give you facts, and you tell me if it's Anne Baxter or Anne Bancroft.
Oh, this is fun. Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Which Anne is it? Who is the granddaughter of Frank Lloyd Wright? Is it Anne Baxter or Anne Bancroft?
That's Anne Baxter.
Yes. Very good. Did you just
Which
know
is
that?
funny. Yeah, I did just know that. But it is funny that because the set for her house was very Frank Lloyd Wright-ish in architecture style.
It was. It's all that flat angles.
Flat angles,
flat roof. Yeah.
Very high ceilings. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, ready? Question 2. Who was married to Mel Brooks, Baxter or Bancroft?
Bancroft.
Yes, that's correct.
I mean, I have a slight advantage because I knew they were different people.
So you're already ahead of the game. Okay. Which Anne won a Tony and an Oscar for the same role? So it was the same role on Broadway and on film.
Okay, now you might have me here. Anne Bancroft.
It is Bancroft. Okay. Now, bonus question. You're right.
Okay.
Bonus question. What was that role? What film was it? What film or movie or play?
The Producers?
No, it was Miracle Worker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Anne Bancroft originated that on Broadway and then had it on film. So she won a Tony and an Oscar for both of that.
Wow. Good for her. That's great. That's some role.
Yeah. Okay. Whose Hollywood career is a result of being kicked off of Broadway by Katharine Hepburn? Katharine Hepburn hated her. So she kicked her off Broadway, and then she made a whole career for herself in Hollywood.
Wow. Well, I'm going to say Anne Baxter.
You're right.
Okay. I'm sorry. The only reason I went with that is because if Anne Bancroft won a Tony, unless she got kicked off after she won the Tony, which would have been a lot harder for somebody to pull off.
It would have been a lot harder. It was a little bit of an All About Eve situation, actually. There was a little bit of jealousy going on there.
Okay.
Who wrote and directed our family favorite, Fatso?
I didn't know one of them directed
I know.
That was such a great movie with Dom DeLuise.
wrote and directed the film Fatso.
I'm going to say Anne Bancroft.
You're right.
Okay.
And you are killing it. Okay, just a few more.
Sure.
Who played an Egyptian queen in the Ten Commandments despite her own protests of saying, I don't look Egyptian, I look Irish?
Anne Baxter?
It is Anne Baxter.
It is Anne Baxter. Okay. Wow.
She even requested for some prosthetics because she's like, I really think I'm miscast. Like, I want to take this role, but I'm really miscast for this role. And they're like, no, we're casting you because you're Anne Baxter.
Because you're Anne Baxter. Yes. Yes.
Okay, ready? Last one. Who is not related to Ben Stiller? Which Anne?
I'm going to say Anne Baxter's not related to Ben Stiller.
This was a trick question. Neither are related to Ben Stiller. That's Anne Mira, who I also confused with everybody. I rolled all of these women into one person.
Anne Mira.
It's Anne Mira, who again, not even adjacent to either one of these Anne's careers.
I mean, no. Not even close.
I think I confused Mel Brooks with the Stiller family.
I was going to say you must have confused him with Jerry Stiller.
I don't know what happened, but everybody's named Anne. They're all about the same age. At least Anne Baxter and Bancroft sort of, if you describe them both, could sound similar, even though they don't really look anything alike. But if you describe them both, they kind of sound like a similar looking person. Anne Mira is just an entirely different lady.
No, she's a joking redhead.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just nothing like them.
That was.
Oh, well, that was fun though. I got to say, I like that.
You did really great on that quiz.
I'm going to give myself credit for all of them except for not knowing the role.
Right.
Because in the trick question, to be fair, Anne Baxter is not related to Jerry Stiller.
That
so.
is fair.
I mean,
you could have answered either, and they would both be correct. Oh my God! So that was a celebration of the Anns.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah, and this is, again, we were talking about such a great season. This is a season 2, where episode for episode overall is very, very good. So I'm excited for the next one.
But one more thing before we talk about next season. You had briefly mentioned All About Eve, and this episode has a few little nods to All About Eve, a 1950 movie that was really Anne Baxter's breakaway role. So for one, the main plot is Bette Davis played Margot Channing, a name not too far away from Chandler.
Yeah.
And her character is an aging Broadway star. And that essentially she is having difficulty getting cast in roles because, I think she was like 40, and already that's where the drop off of getting these younger roles are. And of course, Anne Baxter starred as Eve Harrington, who was a young girl who was a fan of Miss Channing's, who then manipulated everyone and essentially took over her career. Bette Davis stepped down in that movie for her to go on to have another career. And I don't want to go through the whole plot of All About Eve, because honestly, it's a good movie. And if you haven't seen it, you should just watch it. But Edith Head, as we said earlier, won the Academy Award for that movie for costume designer and became friends with Anne Baxter. And another major character in All About Eve, and really the main focal point of this episode, was a very acerbic critic with a newspaper column played by George Sanders. Oh. So basically you had this really kind of vicious critic who blackmails Eve in the movie. And of course, this vicious critic was blackmailing Nora in this episode. So
there's a lot of parallels to draw then. That's a lot.
That was kind of a lot, and I don't know if it was quite the big clock level in Death Lends a Hand, where it was really the major plot of the movie. This one seemed more like little nods to it, but certainly more than enough to not just be an accident. These seemed like they were clearly intentional points that they put in.
Yeah, I would agree. Oh, that's fascinating. I actually really like the movie All About Eve.
Yeah, I'll have to watch that again. It's been a while since I saw that.
I do like this episode, and I like Anne Baxter a lot. I don't know if I've seen her in anything other than All About Eve and then this episode.
I don't know that I have either.
Did you see Ten Commandments? I didn't see that.
I did not. No.
Yeah.
No, but that was one of those huge ensemble movies where they had like everybody in there. I guess they had everybody under Hollywood contract to that studio.
Right.
in that movie, because they had.
I have a question.
Yeah, see?
Is it
What?
really? Wait, is that Edward
G.
Robinson is
that's
in
it, yeah.
10 Commandments?
Well, see, this is what I may be wrong about. I don't know.
That would be hilarious if Edward G. Robinson was in the 10 Commandments, because then Anne Baxter had nothing to worry about by being cast in that movie if they're going to cast him in it.
That's what I was saying. So, it's like, oh, I don't look Egyptian, and meanwhile he's saying, "Where's your God now, Moses?" Yeah, see. So if this part disappears from the podcast, then we know that I'm incorrect.
No, keep it in either way. Is 10 Commandments Burt Lancaster or Charlton Heston? Like, who is
I think
that?
it's Charlton Heston.
Okay. So he's not looking for apes.
No, he's not. He's not, but we still blew it all up. Oh, well, at this point, this was a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And join us next time when we talk about another wonderful episode from the season, maybe one of my top favorites with Leonard Nimoy as the murderer, A Stitch in Crime. You can find us on Twitter at Rumpled T and on SoundCloud at Rumpled Trenchcoat. Or you could find us right here on YouTube at Rumpled Trenchcoat, a Columbo podcast. And so all there is to say until next time is that's one small step for Rumpled, one giant leap for Trenchcoat. Yeah, I know. That got what it deserved, which was
now
not.
I'm just visualizing somebody jumping into a trench coat. Like, I don't know. I don't know about that one at all.
I don't even know. I think we'll just call it a night. Thank you, everybody, for listening. See you next time.
Bye.